you will be asked to complete a few survey questions. That provides us really valuable feedback. We just ask you to take a couple minutes to complete that so we can improve our program offerings. And our special guest star today is Bob Sievert. Bob is currently the NASPO Chief Information Officer. He is a certified e-procurement professional with over 40 years of information technology, project management, business process re-engineering, and e-procurement experience, including 3.5 years of e-procurement public sector consulting, 21 plus years of public service with the Commonwealth of Virginia, and 12 years with multiple private sector businesses. In his work with the Commonwealth, Bob serves as the Director of e-procurement, developing and leading their EVA e-procurement program for 17 plus years. EVA has been noted as one of the most successful programs of its kind, winning 2 NASPO Cronin Gold Awards in 2003 and 2014, and the Cronin Heritage Award in 2017. In 2015, Bob left the Commonwealth to help other states in their endeavors to establish e-procurement solutions. Since that time, Bob has had the privilege of working with 13 states on their procurement automation initiatives. In April 2018, Bob joined NASPO as our CIO and e-procurement subject matter expert as a resource for NASPO members. Bob, welcome. Thanks for joining us. I'll let you kick it off.
Wow. I listen to you read all that and I'm thinking, dang, I'm pretty old now that I think about it. I've been a lot of miles, a lot of places. So, but thank you. I appreciate you all having me get this opportunity to put this together and put this on. I think it's interesting. I'm looking at the attendee count now. We're up to 141. We had 300 and I believe 17 people sign up and register for this. So I'm a little bit overwhelmed and surprised and pleased at the same time. So welcome to everybody. Interesting to me that we've got, as you'd expect, a lot of state governments represented here. I think last count was about 38. We have many local governments covered here, and then folks from the private sector in this e-procurement industry, both in consulting and solution providers. So I'm really excited about this. I'd also share that many of you, especially those of you from Virginia, have been through this with me before, and some of the other states have too, this presentation we're about to go through. Though you're used to me doing it on a whiteboard, it ends up being a little bit hard to read and more like spaghetti when it's all done. But today I promise you something that's legible, not my handwriting, and we'll go from there. I'm going to do my best to not make this a death by PowerPoint, though it's a lot of stuff here, and try to step through it. As Becca mentioned in her discussion or introduction, there is the ability for you to ask questions. We're going to kind of monitor that and filter as we go through this. But again, thank you for your time on this and joining us. I want to just share, as I said, a number of you out there are already doing e-procurement in your own state, some in your local governments. We certainly have, I guess, like I said, the solution providers and some consultants that all have their own experience and their expertise with this. We teasingly call this webinar, which may lead to some others, Bob Talks, kind of a play off of TED Talks. But the real key point about that for me is that this represents my opinion, my experience personally. This is the information that I tend to share with states when I try to work with states. It is also the foundation information I work from when I work with industry providers and solution providers and try to guide and say, you know, what is this thing we're trying to accomplish that we call e-procurement? And with that, I want to dive in here. And again, I'm going to warn you right now. First of all, my background on there, I wanted to tell you that with the coronavirus, I thought I should go where I can get real coronas rather than the virus. So that's why I got the background here, just to inspire me to keep that in a better place in my mind. So next time we do one of these, I'll invite all of you to come on site. We'll do it in person at the beach. All right, so let's dive in. So the first thing I want to do, let's see if I can get my PowerPoint to play, is I want to start off with, you know, we said the title on this thing is e-procurement, what is it and what isn't it? So I want to really start off with if you go on the internet and you just say, what is e-procurement, what kind of definitions you're going to get. So Wikipedia, it speaks to this concept of the business to government, and it's focusing on both the purchase and sale of all these things, but it emphasizes the internet concept here and doing it electronic. And it mentions electronic data interchange there. Then Technopedia is a little more robust in their definition of the e-procurement, but it goes on to speak to some of the same things. Buying online, digital network, and they go on to explain, which I thought was really important and relevant, what's the difference between e-procurement and e-commerce? Because all of us in our personal lives are buying online. That's the e-commerce stuff. That shopping cart with that nice friendly web experience, that's what we're experiencing over there. But as their definition gets into it, e-procurement takes in some other dimensions, and they list here invoicing, purchase order, shipping, and payment tools. So these are the kind of the common definitions. But what I want to take us into, and what today is all about, is trying to focus on public procurement. So I want to just take this from a public sector perspective. And I want to acknowledge pretty much all the efforts that everybody else has been doing under this topic of e-procurement for a long time. So for many of you out there, when we say e-procurement, this has meant a variety of things. Some examples here, many of you have already done some supplier registration functionalities on your website to automate that whole thing. Many of you in most states have already got a place on the public side of their websites to post solicitations, and some of them are even sending out notifications and invitations to bid. Others are posting the contracts online. And then further, many of the states have gone and automated the processing of requisitions and purchase orders in their finance system or their ERP system. And then yet another angle on this is some have taken and bolted on a catalog shopping experience to their finance or ERP system to give a more robust experience for the users when they're doing requisitioning and cutting purchase orders. So these things are all part of what we're going to talk about today, but for the purposes of this session and the vision that I'm trying to perpetuate and share and work with states on is something broader than this. So let's step into that perspective here. So at the generic statement, it's automating the purchase of goods and services, but that's pretty, mundane. So let's get into something a little more specific. Yes, it's about using internet-based tools, but here's where we start getting something a little different. It's about including all areas, all methods, all processes, all aspects of procurement. So we'll talk about what that looks like in a minute. And it's talking about an approach and tools that are structured and focused on doing procurement, not doing procurement as a secondary function, which is what a lot of the finance systems do. This is a focus on getting procurement what it needs in all areas of procurement. And that leads me into the next bullet, all stakeholders, all participants. This is something I hammer again and again, and you would think it's common sense, but when we talk about who those stakeholders are in a minute, it'll make it more relevant. But it's about pushing yourselves to think about who are all of the stakeholders in this process. And then it's acknowledging the finance processes. You cannot buy things without having to pay for them. The payment process is completely dependent on the procurement process. Procurement process needs to be closed out with the finance process for paying. So we have to keep in mind is we can't do things in a procurement that harm the finance processes. And then to get some of these things be efficient, so we don't do things like double entry, keying purchase orders in one system and again in a finance system, we've got to do integration. We've got to connect our existing internal systems that are dependent and connected to procurement processes. We need to make sure that automation extends into those systems, not just the processes. And then finally, the last thing I want to point out here is this idea of supplier systems. Suppliers are a fundamental key part of all of our purchasing practices. If they've invested in automation, we need to leverage that and help them leverage it, which helps keep their costs down, which gets it efficient and quicker. So this is the broad brush of what I'm characterizing as public sector definition for e-procurement. And what I want to do with the rest of this PowerPoint is step into, first of all, what are some objectives behind this? But before we go there, let me hit a couple more key points that underlie this foundation of the definition. So we got all those points I just said, but they're all going to have a focus, first of all, on what tools are we going to use to do those things I just talked about. And there's some key aspects that the tools have to focus on. Flexibility. If they're not flexible and adaptable to your business practice changes, then you're simply not going to have tools that are effective for you. They've got to let you enforce and achieve standardization so that you can have consistency in your processes but the flexibility goes hand in hand because not every part of state government or local government is exactly the same across all of our agencies, all of our divisions, all of our departments. We have variations. So this combination of flexibility yet standardization is the challenge and the opportunity that this e-procurement thing brings to us. Then controls. The tools have got to bring for us a focus on bringing some of the rules and procurement into the process in a way that's not burdensome, but yet lets us protect the procurements and make sure the processes are happening properly and give a lot of insight and monitoring for some of the things that are going to come up in our discussion today. And then of course, efficiency. If we do all this work, I mean, how many times have we all gotten involved with being told to use new computer systems and it didn't make your life any better? The whole point here is if we don't do all this in a way that makes doing the job of buying at whoever you are better and easier and more efficient, then what have we accomplished? And how likely is it going to be used? That's another aspect of this we'll talk about. And finally, the tools have got to be focused on bringing the ability to get analytics out of all the usage. And one of the things I love to speak about with these tools and adopting these e-procurement processes is if you do e-procurement for the reasons we talked about in the other slide, the focus on the other slide, plus tools that do these other things, analytics come out of it as a natural output. There's got to be tools that let you get reports and dashboards and all that, but the data is all going to be there so you can do analytics. One of the constant struggles we've all had in public sector is I can't get the data, or I get data and I can't make sense of it. With the procurement tools, having everything else be focused the right way, the analytics is already postured for that. And that's an exciting point about it. And then the last place I want to talk about it with the focus is about stakeholders. I mentioned it before, but I really want to take a minute and dive into who I mean when we talk about stakeholders. The obvious one we always focus on easily is our central procurement offices, where our chief procurement office lives, where the state central procurement folks cut statewide contracts, do the big purchases, do the complex purchases, oversee policy and establish that policy, all those things. But it's also about, as a stakeholder at the agency and below level, where that's where people really do the buying. That's where, if you look at the percentages and statistics, 80% of procurement transactions live at the lower level of government, down at the agency department level. That's where the quantity of transactions happen. It may not reflect the dollars, but it reflects the quantity of transactions. Those people are the ones, when we talk about efficiency and improvement and making things better, that's the volume of bodies we're trying to make a difference for. So they're the key stakeholders here too. And then I've added in here political subdivisions. Depending on your state, you may already have a focus on trying to partner with your local governments. In all cases, the states have got reasons for their local governments to need and want to use contracts, state issues as statewide contracts. So they're already customers in that standpoint. But so anything we do here around those kind of contracts, they're impacted, they're stakeholders, they're ones we should consider. But there's another opportunity with e-procurement that I'll weave into the later discussion, but I'll drop it in here now a little bit. If you do this right and you set this up right, there's no reason you cannot choose to allow a local government to use the system to conduct their purchases, either just for the state contract buys they're doing, or as broad as you want to go, depending on the arrangement you make with your solution provider. What's the benefit? You're going to extend the same efficiencies and gains you give to state government to the local governments. And how you balance that out, a lot of things go into that as the possibilities and the impact. And somebody's got to support them, you got to have help desk, you got to have a lot of things. There's a lot of discussion around that. But as value, there's a potential level of value there that we don't always talk about when we talk about e-procurement for a state, that I always try to weave into the vision for the conversation. So that's why they're on the list. And I've already mentioned end users. I think the second bullet there is speaking to agency department purchasing. Large agencies and large departments often have their own procurement shop, but that's not the actual end users. That's why I've called the end users out here. These are these state employees who are just trying to get the job done they've been given, and they need stuff bought for them. So how are we making it easy or hard for them? That's part of the question we got to consider in this. And then their bosses, their managers, and somebody's got to approve those purchases and review them and make sure it's staying within budget and we're buying the stuff we should buy. That's a stakeholder perspective here that we have to have in mind if we're going to make this successful. And I've already mentioned finance from a process perspective, but they're a stakeholder here for the reasons I've already talked about. One that you may not think of, auditors. In public procurement, in government, public sector, we are all under the microscope, rightly so, of the auditor branch of government. It is a fact that they have to be there. It's something that we owe our taxpayers. It's just a part of doing business. Now, in procurement, the auditors periodically need to come through and see that information to do the validations they have to do. Their lives are a miserable experience in most cases right now because they don't have access to data any better than procurement does. And they're trying to do their jobs. And guess who's got to go find the data to give it to them? It's the procurement people who are busy trying to do contracts or sourcing events or POs. So there's a huge impact there. If the auditors are considered as a stakeholder, then what you do should automatically give you a way to provide that to them for their purposes in a way that lets them do their job efficiently also, but also takes the burden off the procurement office. And then suppliers. One thing in my Virginia experience, and as Becca told you, and there's many of you from Virginia, welcome here. I hope none of you have camera access so you can show pictures of what you've seen me do in the past with costumes. That I like to say that's a part of my past and not my present, but I'm still warning NASPO that's yet to come. So please don't let them in on too much for me. But I want to go ahead and say suppliers, one of the things we said in Virginia was this whole concept of e-procurement only works if you've got suppliers putting product on the shelf that people can buy. You know, I can put a system up, I can give people logins, I can give all these configuration, but if somebody goes in to buy something and it's not in the system to buy, or they don't have an easy way to buy it from the suppliers they need to do business with, then we fail. So that perspective of suppliers is crucial here, but the suppliers are also our partners in the sense that they are our contract holders. They're the ones we have contracts with. They're the ones delivering to us. If we make this system think of them and look for opportunities to bring efficiencies and simplicity to them, we give a whole variety of things that are beneficial to them that we're going to talk about in subsequent slides. And the last one I want to harp on, it's this whole external concept. We as public servants have an obligation to the taxpayers and the public that never goes away. And we hear about it, we get in the news, we get all kinds of laws passed about making things transparent and so on. They are a part of this stakeholder group that we should keep in mind and should focus on when we're trying to do e-procurement so that what we do takes care of them as a byproduct without having to do necessarily extra effort. And I put the politicals down here as trying to come up with a generic word. We have all in this government organization have the legislature, the governor's office, groups like that that have reason to keep track of what's going on in procurement. And their views, their needs are completely different than people participating in conducting procurements. So we need to think about what we're doing for e-procurement and are we taking care of this other stakeholder group too? Or is there any way we can make it better, especially if you think about what we've had to do in the past, like freedom of information requests where we got to go pull all kinds of data. Some states call it an open records request.
Hey, Bob.
So I spent a little longer on this. Yeah.
We did have a question out here. Mark Hayden from New Mexico, he wanted to know, he said that he recalled that NASPO was working on an e-procurement RFP at one time, and he wanted to know if that was still ongoing.
I can't give a lot of detail on that. It's a project under review right now. So we've got the process we go through is put an idea forward, and then our board reviews it and decides if it's a good idea. So that concept and prospect has been put forward as something for consideration, but we do not have any decisions at this point on it. So yet to come, Mark. So we'll keep you posted across the board. All right. Thank you, Becca, and I appreciate chiming in with the questions as they come in. So let me move on to the next slide here, because I do have a lot of slides. All right. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. Those of you that have already done some efforts at getting an e-procurement system, put your own RFPs together, business cases together. This is kind of a high-level listing of the kind of specific goals we're trying to accomplish with everything I've already talked about, with some little more specificity about examples of what we mean by what I've got in the black letter. So increase efficiency, it's all about streamlining, right? And automating. Well, but the point is getting away from all those manual processes. And I would also share with you that and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, in some more slides, there's a lot of things we do outside of our existing systems that are Excel spreadsheets and access databases and email chains and file folders. All of that is part of this automating and streamlining too, not just the manual processes, but getting better automated things than what we're already doing is part of that. Reducing prices. One thing you're going to see from this process we're going to walk through, there's going to be a lot of opportunity to increase supplier participation, increase our supplier pool, get more competition, and give a way for suppliers to get lower overhead costs so they can give us better prices. And then analyzing, I got a whole bunch to talk about on that we've got coming up, but it's all about not just the spend and the contract data, but some other things as well. Spend under management. We've heard those phrases for years and years in procurement of trying to get the spend under management. You know, I can only see so much, I can only manage so much, I can only monitor so much with the tools and the processes I've got. So it's about bringing that in here. And one of the great things about getting visibility into it is getting strategic about buying instead of reactionary about buying. Again, this is old mantra stuff, motherhood apple pie from a procurement standpoint, but I'm just using it as foundational information. Expanding use of our contracts, I already talked about local government there, but how do we get the benefit of using these things to get more usage of our contracts? And I already talked about transparency. And I think the only key thing here to add on the transparency stuff I've already talked about is the self-service reference here. If we do transparency in a way that delivers the information that those stakeholders I talked about earlier need in a way they can get it for themselves, you just took yourself out of, in procurement, out of the work to go provide it. Huge, huge benefit there. So let's step on. So the way we're going to get into this, I'm going to break e-procurement up from a kind of process perspective. And the phrase that kind of has evolved over this effort the last several years with trying to go after e-procurement is we've tended to call these work streams rather than processes, because process as a word isn't comprehensive enough. And so we've kind of coined this phrase, and it's caught hold in all those states I've been working with recently in the last 5 years. So this is how we're breaking it down. We're going to step through these things one at a time. Need to pay, and we're going to talk about catalog capability, which overlaps into need to pay, and we'll step through each one of these. Supplier enablement management, sourcing data management, contract management, and spend data analytics. So the way I'm going to do this and take you through this, and now we're going to get into Bob's not so artistic way of trying to draw pictures, but so much easier to read than what I do on whiteboards. I'm going to step you into a picture or kind of version of this list. So this is a very summary kind of view of the same 6 work streams I just went through. Need to pay, catalogs, and so on. The thing that's been added to the slide is down at the bottom, the finance ERP system. And that it'll become apparent why it's here. It's not a work stream, but it is a fundamental part of all of the work streams, because when we, as I said, when we buy, we got to pay. We can't break it. So how do we leverage that technology that's there with what we're going to do with e-procurement? That's what this slide's about. So here's where I start playing some not so cool, but it's better than nothing animation here. We're going to change this picture up a little bit so that I can talk a section at a time. We're going to push these things to the side, give me some room to play, and we're going to bring them down and talk right off the bat. We're going to talk about supplier enablement and management is the first work stream I want to talk about. In an e-procurement concept, in an e-procurement world, when we succeed at going forward, the things we can try to accomplish with tools and changes in practices and process for the supplier side of this work is in these areas. First of all, self-registration and maintenance of that registration. A fundamental change for many of our states, certainly was for Virginia when I started there. We were doing the state kept supplier vendor database in our finance system. We had all kind of bidder lists we kept off the line on the side. All of this, the information about the vendor was and supplier was only as good as when I got it. They changed. I never had it current. This e-procurement concept is about give the suppliers a way to register themselves, give them a way to maintain that, make sure that information stays current. Tools and features and functionality help me drive towards keeping that current and up to speed. The next one I talk about is we work across the top here, bid and response solicitation. This whole supplier side of e-procurement, often for many states and for many public sector, we tend to stop with the self-registration piece. But you think about this broader, think of something like a supplier portal where we're trying to give suppliers things that are going to benefit them and us. So bid in response to solicitations, giving them a way to respond online, woven into the same place where they play and register. And one core aspect about that that's really interesting and powerful about where the e-procurement tool industry has come, the solutions, is that they have brought this concept of roles into the supplier registration. So now a supplier doesn't just register and submit a bid, they can actually distinguish purposes and roles for their employees in their registration. So this stuff intersects and overlaps. So I can say this employee in my company is allowed to commit the company and submit bids, but they can't update their registration account, or they can't submit invoices, but that salesperson can submit the bids. So I can start making those distinctions and get some benefit as a supplier in the same area where they're bidding. The next one to the right there, submit contracts and reports. The same portal, as we'll talk and we'll show a little bit when we get down to contract management, lets the supplier, you can allow the supplier to get in and say, instead of emailing you those reports or any of the information they owe you, they can come into their account and access and submit it to you inside this tool in this system. Getting their orders, receiving those orders. We're going to talk about this some more when we show where the orders come out, but this same portal, the same function, can give the vendors a place to go get those orders for those that need it electronically, so it just goes into their backend system. You know, the big guys, the Office Max, the Staples, the Grainger, the Dell, those guys that are really want those orders electronically so no one's manually doing work, that's part of what's supported. But from the supplier side, it's also about letting people log in and get those for the ones who are less sophisticated. And then the access reports to the right there. This is one of the things when we get the reporting I'll come back to, but the idea is you have a lot of data that's helpful and powerful to the vendor, specifically and obviously about their relationship with you and how they do business with you. But this is also a place for them to say, I want to come in and see all the detailed orders that were coming to me across all of the e-procurement system, and get some access and see insight. I want to see which of my salespeople are doing good work and which are doing bad work with the state or the public sector entity here. So those access reports, we'll talk some more about that. Collaborating and signing contracts, and again, I'm going to hit that one in more detail from the state perspective, but these tools, these functionalities, e-procurement has the opportunity to bring that work where they can send questions to the state or the government and say, hey, I'm asking about this particular solicitation, or I'm asking about this contract, or I need to know what you're doing over here with where you're going to potentially go in the future. These tools, this functionality can bring that collaboration into the same system as part of this. And I talk about signing contracts. You can even take and bring all the e-signature into this process too. And again, we'll talk about that further when we cover the state perspective. And then catalogs. These tools deal with catalog submission. I got invoices mentioned there too. All of this is about if they submit it to you, giving them a place to do it electronically in their account. And then the last one on supplier, on the right there, supplier performance. The day and age of our struggles of trying to figure out as government how to manage supplier performance in a way that takes and makes it more objective and less subjective and lets the supplier participate in that conversation where it's appropriate. This concept of e-procurement realistically brings that into the process now and into the tools. It's something you can expect to do and benefit both sides. And finally, the integration with the finance system. That's why I put it in the bottom of the slide. I told you a minute ago when I talked about self-registration, we all have a history that the finance system has a vendor file. That vendor file is a payee file. It's about who they have to pay. If you buy from them in something called e-procurement, they've got to be able to pay them. If they've never paid that vendor before, then it's not in their vendor file. We've got to be able to make sure that what the supplier does in signing up in e-procurement gets to the finance system at the right time when you're going to need to pay them in the process. So it's a challenge about the tools. You don't necessarily want every vendor who signs up to get on a bid notification to get into the finance system because you're never going to pay everybody. So that's one side of it. And then the other challenge to this connection is that maintenance part I talked about. So if you vendor registers, you cut a purchase order to them, you need to pay them, they get integrated down to the finance system. You're going to do business with them again next year. They come in and change their location and their address. That change has to get down to the finance system too. So this whole concept of integration gets pretty sophisticated, but the really cool opportunity about this is existing standard commonplace technology and solutions today. So that's an exciting part about it. It's not the struggle it was once upon a time. So that's supplier enablement management. And I apologize, I know I'm going fast. I've got a lot to get through. You guys have a chance to ask the questions and we can insert them here. And again, a lot of more that could be added to this. I'm trying to hit the mainstay that comes to mind that I talk about a lot when I'm working with states and local governments.
Hey, Bob.
So let's put this one away. Yes, ma'am?
Yeah, just real quick. Given the state of procurement right now, like with this crisis, the COVID crisis, between the emergency procurements, right, and everybody working flat out, plus this pivot to teleworking, what do you think that has done or revealed about the need for e-procurement or the state of it?
Wow, great question. It's a conversation we've had several times. In fact, NASPO has been hosting some weekly calls with industry advisors and others, and especially the higher ed folks have been coming in that have supply chain programs. And it's interesting, on their own, they brought to the table that the states who have had less of an impact from buying perspective are those with e-procurement systems. And it probably seems pretty obvious, but the more manual your processes are, the harder it is to be responsive to emergencies and quick turns. And in those circumstances, what often happens is the procurement authority and execution has to be pushed down to lower levels because you can't manage it centrally timely enough to keep up with the demand. And so the e-procurement systems have actually proven to give a big leg up. It's not a panacea, it doesn't resolve everything, but it gives you a lot more access to find suppliers that are in the line of business you're in. It allows you to bring a lot of those collaboration together where you're saying, hey, a bunch of people need masks at the same time. I've got a natural tool set to bring that information together. And then we're all going to be monitoring and managing this after the fact. Where did all that go? Who did what? The auditors are going to come around and look at this. As I said before, an e-procurement system gives you a leg up on being able to get that insight. So I think not only the tools the need for e-procurement has been elevated, I think the procurement as a profession in government has been elevated because number one, regardless of whether you're manual or you got an e-procurement system, the whole focus on getting things bought and timely and making that better. And it takes the professionals to get it done right or fix it if it's been done wrong. That all got elevated to the right people, the right perspective. But you know how it is, memories are short. You're going to be, this awareness will be around while the crisis is happening. When if, and I'm sure it will happen, it'll get settled down and we'll get back to what folks are calling the new normal. What I don't want to see is this visibility get missed. And that's another reason why you're seeing NASPO push a lot of things happening, including this webinar we're doing. We're trying to build out that message towards support for the procurement shops to be able to go make their lives better so they can serve better. So long discussion to the simple question, but I hope they hit the point.
Thank you.
So coming back to the PowerPoint, what I've done here is I put away the supplier enablement stuff and I said, let me bring up the need to pay and catalog work streams because they work together. And I'm going to build you a piece at a time so we can talk about it a piece at a time, the parts of these processes, these work streams. So right off the bat, this all starts with this concept of what I've termed a user request. And in these processes of e-procurement, in this practice of e-procurement, first of all, it can be in the form of just a simple, hey, somebody that says, I need a pencil. And they don't have to do anything else. They don't have to do a formal requisition. They could just say, I need a pencil, and these tools will get it to the person who can take it from there. Or it could be as fully sophisticated as a requisition that's smart enough to say, you only need to fill out these parts, somebody else is going to fill out the rest. That's kind of this user request piece. But I think the one thing I want to hammer home here, for those of us who have been automated in the past, if you haven't done a fully rolled out e-procurement system down to the state employee level, then today, who does requisitions in your world? If it's in any kind of automated fashion at all, it's somebody who's well removed from the end user. It's somebody who's got keyboard access to the finance system and they're creating something called a requisition because of emails they've gotten, paper forms they've gotten, or whatever. This step is about taking that activity down to the person who really needs something. So it's why the work stream is called need to pay. We're trying to go down to where people need something. They're the user, they put in the request, the system, the tool, the process brings the controls, the efficiency, the simplicity to the ability to go do this. And it's not it's not a reach to expect this, because every one of those same people I'm talking about are out buying stuff on the internet today for Christmas and for birthdays and for whatever reason online. And it's the same concept of work. It's just overlaid with our government here. And granted, it's not as simple as the open internet has, because of the, you go to the Dell website I mentioned earlier, you go to Office Depot, I go to some of these other ones. They don't have all those government or our red tape government rules overlaid on it. We have to have those things. So it's not as simple, but it can be more than sufficiently simple for the right people to be able to get access at that lower level. But getting back to the bullets on this slide, the couple core points I wanted to also bring out is this is the opportunity to also apply accounting, thinking about the finance system. We're trying to build towards making a purchase. I know come downstream here, we're going to have to make sure that it's coming out of the right budget, that there's money for it, that it will get paid for and accounted for and encumbered against the right account. The sooner you put in the process as accounting, that's what you can expect. And exciting to me, one of the out-of-the-box typical integrations with any of these e-procurement tools is that they will actually be happy to get the accounting valid data from the finance system and keep it in sync so you have a chance to do that. And I say optional here because you don't have to do it at this step. These tools allow you to pick where it makes most sense for you. And one thing I'll just give you as a statement that I don't have in the slides, I talked about flexibility when I talked about focus. That flexibility steps into these processes we're going to go through in the concept of you can be different at different places in the government organization. I could say one agency, I'm going to let the end user put accounting on here, and I trust them implicitly. And we all know that's not likely. So probably there's like 5 people that I know the accounting string, and I'm going to let those 5 do it, but not the others. And I've got that flexibility. So that's a cool thing there. And then the last bullet I had here that I want to cover in this user request, and we're going to weave it through the rest of the slides, is this use of the P card. All of our states have gone down this path, and local governments as well, of trying to use a purchase card or a procurement card, whichever you call it, towards getting more efficient. It let us get out of the purchase order business and let it go make these purchases. Streamline a lot of things, but what did you give up? You gave up some insight and control as the procurement office, because you don't know what people bought until that bank statement comes in. And if you're trying to manage the procurements and make sure people aren't buying things they shouldn't buy, or they should be using state contracts and they're not, if we're going to do e-procurement, we've got to marry it up with the use of the P card so we get the benefit of the P card efficiencies that help the payment part of the process, but do it in a way in the e-procurement system so that while we have gone back to generating purchase orders, we're doing them so efficiently that that impact is not a big negative versus the gain we get by getting all of our purchases in a place that's visible and be managed. And I like to say this about P-card purchases. E-procurement lets you monitor and see a P-card purchase before it actually happens. So if you need to intervene, you can. As opposed to today, where the bank statement comes in and it's all after the fact, and you've got to go through it. P-card purchases who here get the benefit of overlaying whatever rules and controls you need, but I will always challenge any organization, be careful what you do. You can put so many controls on there that you make using the P-card, the benefits of it go away. You've got to be able to balance that, and that's a larger conversation. But the point for this slide presentation is P-card is an integral part of planning and thinking of e-procurement, and it's a fundamental part of these e-procurement systems. So that's a good news thing for us and an opportunity thing for us. So let's move on to the next step. I want to talk about, and I got to watch my time because I talk a lot and we're already 40 minutes into it. Oh my God, I'm going to have some trouble finishing here. So let's talk about the next step in this process is just, somebody said what I want. Now I'm going to go find those items. I call this item entry. This is where I'm filling out that request and shopping, but it's down to, I've loaded catalogs. I've got what we call punch outs, which means I'm accessing the websites those suppliers have, like Office Max and Grainger and all. I can access them through the system. I can shop them. I can have contracts in here. And I can even offer, if that fits your state, the ability to represent organizations, companies that want to sell to you in the form of catalogs, but they don't have a contract. So if you want to start building some competition like a marketplace inside the tool, you can do that. And in-state resources, that's all about talking about if you've got a part of your state government that's acting as a vendor and selling, that's what that is. And then direct entry, it's not on contract. I just need to be able to say this is what I'm getting. I may have got the quote somewhere else, but I need to be able to buy it. And then getting quotes. One exciting aspect about this, the tools behind this, is they have embedded the idea of I'm shopping here. No, I now realize I need to go get quotes. I can spin that off of what I'm already doing instead of going somewhere else in the system to do it. Very exciting piece to this. So let's talk about the catalog for a second. So the catalog aspects, main things I want to hit here are about, first of all, it's not just about commodities, it's also about services. Great success has already happened at bringing shopping experiences and finding services. The great, even some specialty versions of tools are out there to handle things like staff aug, where you're doing temporary labor, and you get rates and all that kind of thing. Or configuration items, like I like to use police cars as an example. I got a base police car in contract, and I got all these options for the police car, different radios, different light bar, different sirens, because you want to bust everybody's eardrums. So how do I build that? They've got those kind of things you can expect as e-procurement that can be automated now. And then the creation of the catalogs and manager, that can be the supplier or the state. I've already mentioned punch out. And then these catalogs have a whole potential to bring the review of catalogs into the tool instead of keeping that outside. We used to do it through an email and Excel spreadsheet review and then load it in the system. All of that approvals concept can be, you should expect that you can do it in e-procurement now as a possibility and an opportunity. And then this catalog monitoring lets you keep track of who's using what and go from there. We'll talk about catalogs again in contract management. I'm going to finish in 20 minutes, Lori. Oh my goodness. We should have made this like 5 hours. Approvals.
Well,
I know. Okay, approvals. This whole thing has approvals in here. I'm not going to read the bullets to you. I just want to call it a core point. The first bullet's the key thing. Smart business rules. The tools, the technology has evolved now where you don't have to settle for just a simple rule that says, oh, it's over $500. I need to go to one person. It's configurable. It's got the capability for data-driven. You can expect these things. The solution set out there in the world, the industry has come huge strides down this path, got all the things we need, but it's also got the idea at this approval step, here's my opportunity to take that requisition, because I'm finally built out a requisition, and feed it to the finance system, because now we've got to go make sure the budget's right. We need to make sure the accounting codes I'm doing are still current. Even though I may have connected it and loaded the accounting codes from finance, they could have just expired or run out of money. So this whole concept of using the finance system and feeding the finance system, and one of the core things I'll share about the finance system, especially for those of us on the call who have only got a finance system where you're doing everything today, this doesn't mean you're throwing away all of the configuration and the work you've done to set up in the finance system. If you've got finance approvals today that you want to continue to execute, you have the option to either build them into the e-procurement process, or when you pass that requisition down to the finance system, execute them so that you can get that passed. Because what's happening in procurement here is it's gone down and said to the finance system, may I proceed to the next step? And if it's in the finance for any reason, which includes you can use the approval rules that are up there, they're already configured, says no, the process backs up. If it says yes, it can proceed. So let's proceed. Creating the purchase order, just the core thing here. We talk about purchase orders, but the reality in procurement is that there's always changes. There's always something someone didn't think of, they want something different. There's always examples of that. And this is one thing you can expect from the e-procurement concept, is to be able to not only support getting those purchase orders out, but doing the variants and variations you deal with change orders as well, all woven into this. And then at this PO step, we already went with a requisition. At most, that just checked the budget. It didn't actually say I'm spending. Now I'm ready to say I'm cutting a purchase order because I went through all the other approvals besides the finance system check. Now I'm going to hit the finance system and say, okay, I'm ready to commit that money. I'm ready to lock it down. So it's another opportunity for integration to not only lock the money down, but to make sure the budget didn't go away in that short amount of time. Accounting codes are still valid. all of those opportunities like I discussed with the other integration with requisitions. Oh, let's go on to approvals. So you have the opportunity to say, I want another set of approvals after the system creates the purchase order. It's an optional thing, not commonly used, but it's something you can expect you can have with these tools and these processes. And then one of the big ones from a supplier perspective, I'm ready to send that purchase order out. We call it PO dispatch. You know, it's one of those things we tried to think of a nice fancy word, couldn't come up with anything except this kind of a plain Jane kind of word, but dispatch. It's the idea of getting that order to the vendor because they can't execute to get it. Electronic is the goal and the vision here. The more we can get it, the faster we can get it to the vendor, the less work they have to do when they get it. Is all about efficiency and benefit to get them to execute the order and get stuff to you. So electronic is the vision. I listed 4 examples of what really electronic can mean: email, eFax, EDI, CXML. The last 2 are about getting that order to the supplier in a way that nobody on their side has to put human hands to. It just feeds into their delivery system and moves right on out. The first 2 are the email. We have all done POs by email. The tools, you can expect the procurement system to do that. eFax is the variable here. Fax is when we all started this. When I started e-procurement in 1993, way back when in the olden days, when I started chasing e-procurement, and we finally got to do it in 2001, fax was the predominant, very dominant out there in our vendor community. Email was still fresh. Internet was still relatively young. So we supported faxing. As time has gone on, the focus and need for doing eFax, faxing those orders has fallen off. And I'll tell you, suppliers, interestingly enough to me, I had a lot of times where they were complaining about how we're burning up their fax machine and killing paper because we're spitting out so much stuff. All the email notices we sent to invite them to bid, the orders, everything. So fax is a questionable thing about whether you want to anticipate it or not, but I think it comes down to, in your state, local government, whatever, your supplier community, how many of them are in a world where fax is still dominant? That will govern whether that's intent. I just wanted to call that one out. The rest of these tools, you can expect it's all about that self-service we talked about with the supplier enablement. They can log in and get it themselves, and then the user can print it. And again, the P-card processing, I would just emphasize a couple points here. One of the big mistakes I get a lot when I'm helping states look at e-procurement is the expectation that because I said I'm using a purchase card, no matter how it gets to the vendor will be able to process that purchase. They'll get the credit card number, the purchase card number. The reality is to be PCI compliant and compliant with our own regulations in government about protecting that credit card number, that P-card number, and especially the secret code on the back, you can't send it to them on a printed PO because you never know where that printed piece of paper is going to go. You can't put it on a fax, can't put it in an email. So what happens there, the EDI and CXML guys, they're golden because that's a secure connection, known entity to known entity. It passes the PCI compliance, PCI being the overriding authority on P-card and credit card practices. But the email fax, which you typically get is like a masked number with maybe the last 4 digits shown. So what's that mean? Supplier's got to make a phone call. Got to call somebody and say, I need the whole credit card number so I can pay this. And so the challenge there's a loss of efficiency in that reality, but that's a reality. So that's part of the balance here of some things we don't get gains on, but the broader gain is worth the extra pain. And I will share that some of these suppliers will say, call you the one time and put it in your profile in their system so they never call you again. That's a great idea, but you also have to pass it on the sniff test with your own policies. For example, in Virginia, when I was there still, I don't know if it's still the case, our policy for using the P-card was that you could not store it in a non-state system. That number could not be stored in a non-state system. So those are some challenges with the P-card part of this thing.
Hey, Bob, I've got a quick question.
Yep.
Okay. We've got a question here that says, when you switch from a manual procurement system to e-procurement system, how much extra support from staff should states be planning on? Like, do you recommend hiring specialty workers with an IT background, or could you train current procurement employees to do that?
So the reality is it's a little mix of both. There's the implementation period, and then there's living with it after the fact. The goal with living after the fact is not have to hire and replace a bunch of people. It's to train everybody. And I will say this, if they can buy on the internet, they can be trained on this. There's no reason to expect that they can't. That's just the reality. And I will tell you, we've all learned to live with some really lousy systems and be trainable. So to me, that tells me we can train everybody. The question is, how fast can we get them trained and who's going to do the training? So when we get these systems, you contract typically for somebody to help you do the implementation and get you through it as part of the, either with the solution provider or whoever's their partner. And they bring a training component on this, but you have to anticipate as a state staffing around carrying that load when it's done by the contractor. So sometimes that means hiring people to help you get ready, you know, kind of a consulting kind of role in a temporary. Sometimes it means bringing temporary bodies on during implementation to help you carry your share of the workload as the state with the implementation. But it always means making sure you have some key skilled staff to pick up some of these leading roles to make sure this tool you've got is going to be of value to you going forward. The reality is, if you don't do that, my experience is if you don't do that and you don't embrace it and bring it in-house, it's this kind of level, this kind of role, then you will never get the full value out of all these things that you're trying to accomplish. So I think I scratched, that's a larger question. There's a lot more to talk about in that one, but that's kind of how it looks. And I see somebody posted a question that I can see, and they want to know what e-procurement looks like in the future of e-procurement look like. Let me get through these slides and I'll come back to that question because I'm still going to be challenged. We're already going to run over. I already know that. So I'm going to try to not lose too much. So I skipped receiving there. I want to go back to it here a second just to make my point. And there's, apologize, I got click happy here. Let me go see how good I am with my PowerPoint here. I just want to point out that these tools and what you expect to do is get the receiving step in here. All of the things you expect receiving being addressed in these tool set, motherhood apple pie concept you can expect, including the concept of approval of receipts. So often receiving has happened by somebody who's not even in the e-procurement system doing the buying. It's a person at the dock. It's somebody at a receiving room somewhere in a building. So it's like, who's going to get this recorded? I can segregate the person doing the data entry of receiving from somebody who's going to bless it. To include, you could have somebody just keying in paper receipts and have whoever ordered it touch it and make sure that it was actually matching what was supposed to. And the integration again, if the finance system needs receiving data, these you can expect that you're going to be able to provide it to them in electronic fashion. And then invoicing. One of the great opportunities that is hard, acknowledged really hard to adopt from a business change perspective is invoicing coming into e-procurement. E-procurement and invoicing, when you get an invoice from a vendor today, our practice in government is at least doing a two-way match, if not a three-way match purchase order to say I did order it for that price and that's from that vendor so I can compare that to the invoice. Receiving to say I did get it. I don't want to pay for something I didn't get. And then I can bless the invoice. Three-way matching idea. Our world, finance does that. That's been the history. The opportunity of the e-procurement is since they already have the purchase order and if they already have the receiving, you got two of the three-way match already there. The opportunity is to automate it in e-procurement. So you can expect to have the opportunity and the option as a government entity to choose to look at bringing the invoicing step of that three-way matching into the e-procurement system. And another sideline benefit to that, there's a lot of vendors out there who are getting their orders electronically, the ones I mentioned before, Grainger and so on. They would love to send you their invoices electronically so they don't have the manual creation, the mailing, waiting for it. They would love to get it into your system so they can get paid faster. That's really, really important for the vendors who are small business, who don't have the financial ability to carry money that long. So these tools are not designed to say, let me at least help you get the invoicing into the government world. They can let the vendors who are accepting electronic orders use that same channel for getting the orders to come back to e-procurement with the invoicing. And then these tools will allow for everybody who's not that sophisticated to just go into that supplier account we talked about before, call up the PO and do what something called PO flip. I'll just make an invoice right here in your system that reflects what I need to get paid, and now it's in here. And then this invoice functionality in these tools all have the approvals and the controls that you would expect that we have to have from government, so you can do that matching. And then you can get it down to finance. And then here's where it gets exciting to me. If your finance organization says, oh, that's nice and cool, but you can't do three-way matching, then at least let me get the invoice to finance by letting the vendors who can do it electronically, the ones who can do PO flip, create the invoice here, and I'll just hand the invoice itself down to finance to do the matching down there. So you can have it either way is the opportunity and potential to ask for. And I can tell you right now, if you imagine all the invoices finance gets in paper today, it has to key. And if you take a lion's share of that away with going electronic and these fashions are described, you can only imagine the efficiency, the opportunity that creates just from finance standpoint. If all they have to do is validate what they get from the e-procurement system by looking at the voucher that came down or the e-invoice they got, and they have a lot less work, much more effective role for them down there. All right, so let's step on to another work stream. And I know we're down to 4 minutes here. We may want to pause here in a minute just to hit any questions for anybody who has to leave, and then I'll come back, but I'll step quickly through sourcing. So we just went through need to pay. That's where everything about purchase orders happens in invoices. Separate from that and fully connected, you can expect fully connected integrated is this concept of building out your sourcing events. So these tools, these expectation of procurement is about bringing every kind of solicitation you do, every flavor into the tool set. Getting efficiencies where it really makes sense with templates, like I say here, and all the different kinds that you do, including auctions, reverse auctions, which I know is kind of a dirty word in some worlds, but it's got a role, it has a role. Dealing sealed and unsealed, so you got the locked envelopes and all that stuff. All of that is motherhood and apple pie for what you can expect from e-procurement. There's different variations and flavors of how these things look, but you can expect that from get that gain here. You can even go in and define teams in here. So you got a whole defined collaboration happening in here using within the system. I can get out of doing so much email. I can bring it in here. And I even have an approvals concept you can expect here. And I use this scenario all the time. If you've got a larger procurement shop, I got some junior buyers that have to have somebody like a manager touch a solicitation before it's allowed to go on the street. You can expect to be able to build that into what you do here with e-procurement and get all that in the efficiencies too. So if you start thinking about what I just described, everything here, the one thing you also can think about as an outcome of using these tools is think of the procurement files we all keep today and have always kept, that big monster paper file of all the copy of the emails we printed, the printout of the bidders list, all the flavors and versions of the solicitation we went through and back and forth. Everything I just described here is doing it in the system. So guess what? You can start moving down the path of an electronic procurement file and not have to do the paper. So we've always talked about going paperless, going paperless. Well, the reality is paperless is a smoke dream somebody to get completely paperless, but there's a lot you can do. And this is a great example of it. All right, so let me hit this next step. There's the idea of I build it, now I can post it and publicly get it out there. You expect the system to get me do notifications. Hey, I can even get this Q&A stuff where I publish it and people ask questions and I answer, get it all in this one tool, and I can have it auditable, manage, and hey, you can even control whether somebody asks an inappropriate question, you can get that sucker out of there. You can make sure the answers are right. You can even have those things, Q&As reviewed before they're published and viewable publicly. And then what I call solicitation management. So the bid's on the street and you're managing it while it's live. I already talked about the Q&A stuff, and this is about responding, changes to that solicitation in the tool, dealing with those things, amendments, some people call addenda, with that idea of changes, getting those public posted, that whole information. And one thing I love about these tools, for those of us who have had websites where I had to reach out to a webmaster to go and put it on the web for me, this all happens, it's in control of the person who's doing the solicitation. I want it online, I tell it it's time to go, it goes. I need to take it down, I tell it take it down, I take it down. I don't have to go to somebody else. I manage my procurement as the person who owns the procurement. That's one of the great powerful things here that takes and it adds an efficiency for all our web posting stuff we've historically done, brings it into an automated fashion here. And then you can do the monitoring as people are bidding, sealed stuff, you can't see what they're bidding, but you can tell how many bid responses you're getting. You can see as much detail as you're allowed to see. This is where the flexibility and configurability comes in, what you expect from these tools. Whatever your rules are about visibility, you can control that. And then the bidding itself, so it's all about what we already talked about. Suppliers come in, they get into the account, they can do it for themselves, it's all secure, they got lockbox. Cool thing for the vendors that a lot of this industry, its solutions have adopted now. As a supplier, you get one of those really monster bids. I love one in Virginia. We had one that we called it the ice cream bid. We bought ice cream for our prison facilities. And so we had all this ice cream stuff, hundreds of line items. Pain in the butt to fill out the response one line at a time, so you can take it to Excel, fill it out as a vendor as efficiently as you want, and then upload it and fill it out. And it works really well. And these tools will allow, I'm sorry, go ahead, Becca.
Yeah, we've got a question in the chat box. I want to let you read it because it's a little bit technical. I don't know how to.
All right, I'm gonna hit this last two bullets and then I'll go there. Just a couple of things. So many of our bids want the opportunity for somebody to offer us an alternative. That's already in here, and attachments. You know, that's huge here for us, especially the world has changed. You can do construction projects here. You can have construction drawing, CAD files come here. The day and age of that being too large is no longer what it used to be. All right, so let's look at the question here. I'm gonna put online bid away, and I'll bring up the other one just so we can look at it while I'm talking. The question is, what e-procurement solutions do you see are out in the market? Do you recommend a custom solution, or are there COTS products that can handle all the complexities of e-procurement? Well, I'll leave out the great presentation part. But yes, there's plenty of solutions out there. I am extremely excited about where the industry is today versus where I got to do it. Like I said, I did 2 rounds of RFPs to get to an e-procurement solution for Virginia. The last one was in the year 2000, right after our Y2K experience. There wasn't a lot to choose from. Today, you have a variety of options. If you only need one of these work streams, there are a lot of players that have some really amazing tools that are focused only on pieces of this or some combination of them. There's other solution providers out there today that are commercial COTS product, commercial off the shelf, that have the whole suite that I'm describing here. It's different, some of them, they all have a little different flavor and different approach, but the concept is already there. So no, I don't see this, and I don't recommend building a custom solution because there's a lot of great risk. Any of us have been in an IT project and development projects. A lot more risk involved with doing that, and quite frankly, in my opinion, you don't need to do that. There are plenty of alternatives out there. The market's very competitive. The solutions are very good. In most cases, they've been in place enough sufficiently to prove themselves. So I think that's the answer to that question. So let me hit the last couple on sourcing here, and then we'll pause and take any other questions if there are any, because I know I've passed the time. Evaluation, everything about evaluating a solicitation, no matter what kind of it, is woven into what you can expect with e-procurement. So you can see the list there. I don't need to read it to you. I think, again, the emphasis I want you to get from those bullets is what I talked about with the electronic procurement folder. Imagine when you're doing your procurements, your solicitations today, everything you have to do at this step, if there's anything you do is going to be covered by what these tools can do in that bullet list I've got here. So imagine even those notes you're keeping to the file today, bring them in electronically, and it's all in one place. And as a manager, when my buyer is in the middle of this solicitation and they win the lottery and they leave, and I got to hand it over to somebody else, I don't have to go figure out where they had that email saved or what folder they put it on, the directory, the network, or any of that stuff. I got it one place. So let me step on to the award step. So core things about the award step, and I'm separating award from what you actually issue as the award for a reason. So the award step is about just making that decision. Okay, I've reviewed the proposals of the bids. I'm going to say I'm going to give it to this one, or I'm going to give it to multiple, depending on the procurement. I need to have a step for and allow for the possibility somebody needs to approve this and review it. So that's built into what you can expect here. And then there's always the status and public posting of what happened on the procurement. All of that's here. The outcome of the sourcing bid management can either in these tools and what you can expect, produce a purchase order so that I can go and get it as a PO because it was that kind of bid, it's a one-time buy, or I'm actually going to need to issue a contract, either because it's such a large procurement, it needs to be a format different than a purchase order, or maybe it's one of those what we call statewide contracts where people cut POs against it, or it's one of those contracts where you do statements of work against the approved contractors. That's what these tools will produce. The PO dispatch concept, so if you make a purchase order, it's going to feed right down to what we already talked about. I've already set up that electronic connection for purchase orders from the need to pay stream. Why should I invent it again to come out of this award step? I'm just going to tap into it. That's what the tools you should expect, and that's what the tools do. Contract award, it's all about feeding the next step, which is the contract management area of the system, of this tool concept. So I'm putting it away, bring up contract management, and let's oh, I went too far with the build. Let me go back here. So the first step is, okay, I've made an award. I got to build a contract out of this thing. So the contract out of this thing is about, I don't want to key that stuff in again from the bid. I just bring it over here. Well, that's what I was representing on the last slide. But it's also about, hey, I've got standards and formats and practices in my state. I want templates and libraries. And here's another cool thing you can expect both at the build solicitation and the build here. Any concept of templates and libraries, you can expect to have a way to say to a Department of Corrections or a Department of Transportation who's very good, a very sophisticated procurement shop, their own way of doing this, their own templates. They can have their own templates in the same libraries. You can have state standard templates in the same libraries. You can restrict who can see what. So you can, transportation can have a template that no one else but transportation sees. All these possibilities. And then if you let local government use the system too, if that's part of your model, local governments can have their own templates and libraries that no one in state government has to see. We get some great flexibility and configurability to support those variations, so we don't have to dictate one way on top of everybody. And that's a fundamental expectation across all of this that I'm describing. A couple other key things here. I'm really excited about building in your deliverables and milestones. So much of what we do, and we're going to come up to it, about managing the contract after the fact. I got hundreds of deliverables I got to get from these vendors. How do I keep track of it? And I got 15 contracts or 100 contracts to manage. How do I keep up with which ones due next? I define in here what those things are so I can spell it out so I can keep track of it. And then one of my most exciting pieces that's newer to this industry is what I call document authoring. We've all heard about the concept of having great document authoring tools that let me multiple people edit at the same time, version control, check in, check out, all of those kind of things. So the industry has evolved, the technology has evolved. So I'm seeing those kind of capabilities come into the tool set. How much value they have by having them in here versus outside the system depends on your situation, but it is something I would offer up to everybody to look for and see if it's there and what you're considering and how much value it has. But its potential for the long term, I think, is tremendous, especially when we talk about the collaboration bullet there next. What they do with these is they let you collaborate in where you need to go back and forth with the contractor within the system. So you can imagine if you're editing a document and you want them to go review the version and give you comment back, imagine if that was all in the same electronic procurement folder instead of in an email in a Word document that you got to bring back and reconcile to another document. So that's the document authoring and collaboration stuff. And then all of this is about letting you take that solicitation award. You got a bunch of line items. I know I got to produce a catalog later. Let the system just spit it out. Tweak it where I need to. That's something you can expect from this contract management, contract functionality. And then the approvals. So I built the contract. Yeah, that's well and great. But if Bob Seaver's doing it, I can trust you. There's not going to be anything I do that somebody isn't looking at and approving and make sure it's right before it goes out the door. And I'll give you my favorite example is when I was in Virginia and I was the director of e-procurement. The person in the whole system had the least buying privilege was me, because I was playing in the system all the time and I would actually cut purchase orders that I shouldn't have been doing because I'm showing people things. So anyway, approvals, concept, the flexibility to say, hey, I got some central procurement approval rules depending on the scenario built in. I need to do unique things for a specific agency built in. You can expect all that. I need to let the supplier review the documents we talked about and bless it. So you can make them either approve it as a approval in the system, so it becomes an electronic signature, which is considered a valid electronic signature by federal rules. Or you can even integrate e-signature tools. We talk about DocuSign, for example, is really common. Adobe eSign. There's a whole variety of that industry. You can expect that the tool set today has the opportunity to consider doing that. I know that a lot of states aren't that sophisticated yet with e-signature capabilities. A lot of policy stuff around that yet to deal with, but I want you to be aware of. That's a possibility here. Anything like that that brings automation, it brings efficiency is worth having. And publishing a contract, we're all in the world of saying publicly, transparent, putting these contracts out on our websites, they can see them. Some finance systems want that contract record in their system, do their own tracking of purchases against the contract, another integration opportunity that you can expect to be able to do. And then here's what I was talking about, managing the contract. Everything, the contract's live. Now I got to occasionally do amendments, but you can have that setup we did earlier. The system will send you reminders and notifications. Hey, it's time to go get that deliverable from the vendor. It'll even send, you can even look to see if you can send notifications to the supplier who's on contract to remind them they owe you the deliverable. That's what that whole reminders notifications opportunity is. Do all the standard procurement stuff for when you got to do renewals or terminations or extensions. It's all motherhood apple pie. I think one of the other things here, I already mentioned this from the supplier perspective, and I told you you'd see it again. Suppliers can log into their account here. They can go in and submit their spend reports, all their deliverables. These are just some examples of them. They can update the catalogs themselves. These are things that not all solution sets out there may have it, but this is things from the procurement model and vision I would promote you look for, because the efficiencies I think are pretty obvious to you. And if you make the supplier world efficient, you can argue that you're going to bring their overhead costs down. You can start talking about better pricing as a long-term benefit of all that. So then now you're managing the contract, but there's this concept I suggest we talk about is monitoring it. So it's going in and managing it, but what's going on? Who's using the contract? These tools, by having in here, give you that drill down insight. I can see who's cutting orders. I can see if you integrate for the payment side, the invoice side, you can even see what are the payments done against that contract. Those are things you could ask for and expect in the e-procurement world. So that's really exciting. If I'm administering the contract, I got a lot less places to go look to see information. If it's readily right there, just because I'm using the system. And then the whole supplier side, there's a downside that happens with many of our situations in our life. Somebody may complain about the supplier in the contract, and we may have to do a corrective action concept with the contract. This is an exciting area that I've seen evolve in the industry, where automation is being brought into these tools to give you ways to handle that, where you can record those complaints, review them, validate them as appropriate before you even take them into a next step, make them, send them to for response to the supplier through their account. You can build potentially corrective action plans and monitor those with reminders and deliverables, the whole 9 yards. And then the supplier performance. Most of us in government have sent surveys out to people who have used our contract. We said, please tell me how you like the contract. Please tell me how you like the supplier in the contract, because I may need to renew it or I may need to extend it, those kinds of things. All of that is the kind of exciting part that I'm seeing woven into a lot of the tools these days. All right. So I'm putting contract management to bed. This is going to be where he's coming to spend reports, but let me pause a second because I've gone over 13 minutes beyond time already. Becca, do we have any other questions that have been posted that I need to address in case people have to go?
Not at this point. I think we're doing great. Just keep on trucking.
Okay, I'm trying to pick it up, but I don't want to miss too much. So spend and data analytics and reporting, we kind of lumped a lot of thoughts into this one work stream. But these are the things we can expect out of it when we talk about the tool set and what we try to target and what we try to achieve with the procurement. So first of all, motherhood apple pie, standard and ad hoc reporting. I want to read top row and then go down. Standard and ad hoc reporting. So you can expect this tool set. They're all going to come with canned reports out of the box, focused on a lot of things that you would probably expect to do. Tends to be, a lot of it is transactional in nature, like how many purchase orders did I do last month? How many is in so-and-so's plate, kind of some workload perspectives. And they, you should always expect to be able to get some concept of a tool that lets you build reports for yourself, an ad hoc report tool. Some exciting things I'm seeing in the industry with that is, it used to be you had to go to the contractor's programmer to build those ad hoc for you. That's changed. The world's tremendously changed. They've given you the ability to build those yourself, if that's what you have to do. It's still a sophisticated tool set. It's not an end user kind of go build your report thing, because there's too much to know, but it can bring that in-house, and you can even make your own standard reports and publish them into places for users to use. So it's really exciting about that. Another aspect of that, you know, in our world with the internet, it's brought us a lot of graphical stuff and visual stuff, and dashboard concept is now fundamental in what you can expect in tool sets. So what does that mean for you? Well, we all love charts and graphs and that kind of thing. What's exciting about the procurement stuff is the way the industry is evolving. It's not just about one dashboard for everybody to use the same. I'm seeing the ability to say, I'm going to have personalized dashboards from a role perspective. I'm a state contract buyer. I want a certain standard dashboard for that person versus an end user who just buys HVAC valves and fittings and that kind of thing. I want them to see a different kind of dashboard based on their role in the system. There's an end user versus a professional procurement person. I may have dashboards that are organization specific. I want to make sure the entire organization is paying attention to certain kind of work we're doing, so I can make sure I can hold everybody accountable. I can have a dashboard concept that is organization related. So Department of Transportation may want one focus completely different from what Department of Corrections or mental health may want. Then there's the dashboard about personalized. You even have the option to, with this, to look and say, can I even have dashboards that I want it my way? I know what I care about. I want this thing show me my stuff, right? And then the possibility of having a mix of all those things. That's an exciting part of what you can think about for e-procurement now. And then one I harp on from day one in my Virginia experience, public reports. So much of what we try to do, we have been criticized for not being transparent in procurement. Not our fault. But the reality is how hard it was for us without tools and data to be transparent and make visible. So one of the things you can expect to do with these report tools is to look to say, I want to build those things I get asked all the time into reports that I just put on the public website. It's public information. They're asking me for it all the time. Let me just give it to them and let them go. Let it be self-service and I get it out there. And that was one of the greatest successes we had in Virginia was we put, I'll tell you right now, today, any of you can go to the Virginia site, and they'll probably kill me for this because of the flood of hits they're going to take on the website. Public reports out there, you can access the detailed purchase order data that's been put through EVA system since 2001. All of it's there for analytics and research and review. That's a great example of this transparency. So what do we get by doing that? Our FOIA requests, Freedom of Information requests, or open requests, records requests demand dropped to the nothing. People could go get it for themselves. All we had to do was point them where to get it. And it was huge.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you said that it's public from EVA all the way back to 2001?
From March 5th, 2001, when we cut the first purchase order.
You know, former state worker here, our archive process in the state of Kentucky was normally, we only retained records for about 3 years. Sometimes they had to be kept at archive for 5, but you know, that was it. That's impressive. I'm sorry.
That's a great point though. It's the one thing I didn't say to all this. What you do is up to you. So if you've got an archive policy or records retention policy that says, hey, you shouldn't be keeping that stuff out there that long, that's your choice. You can make that choice. We were about a perspective of transparency that there's huge value to do that. And that leads me into the next one. So if that public are the supplier community, the ones you do business with, the ones you're not doing business with, the ones that would like to consider doing business with you, that data you make available in transparency becomes a report that they can use to do an analysis for themselves. And you can even give more of that kind of report to the vendors who have accounts in the system. So now what can they do? If I'm a small business trying to decide, do I want to do business with the state? Or I've been doing business with the state, but I only know one person. Now I can go look at this data and find out, hey, there's all these people that buy what I sell. And look, I can get their contact information. I can go and start building my marketing plan around it. I just took that small business and gave them a chance, another means by which to grow. And it took no labor on my part. It just took making a report part of my transparency vision and concept, right? And the great thing about that reporting too, competition, I show all suppliers what we paid and who we bought it from last time, which is public information. They want a shot at it next time, they know what price they got to beat. I'm just building a competition model right into the whole thing as a secondary outcome of why I did it for transparency. Huge, huge kind of value. So you can see that. And then the last bullet there in the end is going to play into some of the other things. Everything we've talked about is kind of spend data, right? The whole focus, how many POs did I do from the first bullet, how much spend I did, and all these analytics, all spend. But the data you have available for analytics is not just about spend. It's about everything that happened in the system. And that leads me into the next bullet about thinking out of the box. So if I want to do some cycle time analysis, how long did it take my organization to process requisitions? How long did it take me to get a solicitation on the street? And I want to slice that by what type of solicitation. I want to look at down to the individual employee. I want to look at performances of the employee. All of that data is in the system. The tool is geared to get access to all of that data. Now you're only limited by your imagination. One of my favorite examples of this that we deal with all the time is Procurement sometimes gets criticized for not getting enough competition in some areas when they put a bid on the street. Well, as a purchasing person, I can only process the bids I get, and I can only invite the vendors I know about, right? I don't have time to go out and canvas the whole world and find more vendors. Well, guess what you can do with this kind of analytics? I can look at across my bids and target and find places where I'm not getting a lot of responses. Then I can look at the commodity codes associated with that bid. I can go look at my supplier pool, which is the last bullet of this thing. How many of them do I have registered to even sell to me? Hey, I got a gap here. Now I'll go out to the branch of government that takes care of economic development and small and disadvantaged businesses who are trying to build up those people. And I'll say, here's a place we need more participation from the vendors because I got this analytics. And guess what? I can make that a canned report, let them run it for themselves so the machine feeds itself and I don't have to go ping them every time. And guess what else I did? I just made their mission, their part of government's mission, more successful and their supplier community, and it all cycles back. And what does that mean? If they're successful, I get more suppliers, I get more competition, I get better pricing. And I also get the opportunity to spread the taxpayer dollar around to more suppliers, which is one of the underlying mantras that we have as public servants. So you can tell I'm passionate about that one. The next one, cost savings. Yeah, it's all about us talking about cost savings. We all in procurement struggle with, well, how do you measure cost savings? Is it what I paid this time from the last time? Is it look at all the bids I got and average them out and compare it to the low bid? Which one is it? Doesn't matter. You've got all the data here. Once you decide what's the standard for you, the tools have got the ability for you to go build those things out as standard reporting for you. And so it's a great opportunity. Supplier performance. So I mentioned before we have the ability to capture performance. Guess what we can do? We can look across that supplier across their performance across every contract, across any survey I did. I can look across the whole 9 yards and see what they're doing. And I've got access to things I never thought of before. On-time delivery. I got a purchase order. It says when it needed to be delivered. I got receipts. I can see I said to get it here by this date, and I got it by that date. I can do some metrics and start doing some supplier metrics around their performance here, which is again more objective and less subjective. So it's exciting. And I already covered the supplier pool one about doing the analytics. And then the last thing here in the bottom is about integration with finance. We've talked about that a lot, but notice the other systems. You can look to expect in e-procurement that if I've got other data that I want to marry with my e-procurement data to do a more comprehensive report, the technology is there so you can ask for that connection to share that data with your reporting tool so you can now marry stuff up. So where's a nice easy example of that? Spend. Spend in the purchasing system is about what I ordered, not necessarily what I paid. Finance has what I paid. So if I get the finance data payments in with what I ordered, I can look at some new analytics. I ordered $100 worth of stuff. I ended up paying for $75. Where's the other 25? Do I have a problem? I need to chase it or not? But I can also use all of that story to do some trending analysis too. There's the concept of trends of when I buy in terms of ordering stuff in peaks and valleys. Like we all know, end of fiscal year, we're buying all kinds of stuff, trying to spend those dollars. That's not the timing of when they got paid. So if we do the analytics of purchases on timing a trend, we can look at that. But from a budget perspective, I need to look at the payment side of when I pay for it, because that controls which fiscal year is the budget need to be in. What bucket do I put it in? Marry those two together, I can get some predictive trending analysis now. When am I likely to see a peak of ordering? What's that mean to it's going to hit my budget? So I can see the timing and I can start doing some variation analytics. So that's just a finance example. You can also talk about integrating with maybe an inventory system. So you can talk about turn times in an inventory system against your purchasing data. So I can say, I had this contract for buying stuff to support the inventory. Now I can look over here and see turn times. So if I'm the inventory manager, your reports can help me look at the whole story, not just my end in the inventory world.
Hey, Bob, we've got a question.
Yes, ma'am.
We've got somebody who said, how do you guys make sure that data is captured accurately in the system?
Well, so let's talk about where accuracy is a problem. So if the transaction's being happened, let's go back to the beginning of a transaction. Let's pick requisitions. If I'm doing a requisition and I'm picking items off a catalog, the price structure is already there. The accuracy was guaranteed because the catalog didn't get loaded unless it was approved and validated by somebody in my organization. So that's how I get that pricing information there. Receiving is all about, we've got these approval flows in here so we can do some validation so I can get some accurate receiving data there. Anytime we have manual keying, it's more risk of accuracy problems. That's where the approval process in the system gives an opportunity to spot check and validate that. Invoicing, same kind of thing. Electronic invoicing, I've got a lot less chance of an error from fat fingering it in. It doesn't mean that they didn't fat finger it in the supplier side, so that's why we do three-way matches, right? We match it to the PO, we look for those things. So the accuracy is inherent to what you get out of the system by using the system. The front end step of each process is designed to have a chance to check accuracy so the data is validated at the front and carries forward to the end. Now, when you're bringing data from external systems, that's a whole different animal. Now you got to, when you pick a system you want to go to, you better make sure about the accuracy concerns you've got over there before you go ahead and try to integrate with it. Because I don't care how cool it looks. If it's bad data, it's only telling a bad story. So that would be one thing I would put out there. One last thing I want to mention on reporting, and I want to use this as another thinking out of the box thing, something that we discovered in my Virginia experience, and I always share it with all the states. We had a situation where we had governor change, and we all have that. And these programs, especially if they cost a lot of money, there's somebody always challenging that they would like to see the process different, right? So from a procurement standpoint around e-procurement, what we had to deal with was our governors can only serve one term. They can't succeed themselves. So in my years from 1993 until 2014, I went through a lot of governors, and every time we had a governor, we had to come in and explain to them the value of what we were doing that we called e-procurement and make that case. And we also had to do it with the legislators. So one thing we did with our reporting is we constructed a report that was legislative district specific. It summarized all this data and told them which suppliers in their district were getting business, how much business they got, who was buying from them, and it told this story about their constituents so that it told that legislator how well we were serving the people they represented. And talk about a boon. It was all truth. We weren't doing smoke and mirrors, but it gave reinforcement to the value of procurement, the value of the procurement system, and it elevated those two things in the eyes of the legislator. All we had to do was build a report out of here and make it available. So that's reporting. So let me put this one to bed and step into wrap up of the picture part. So this diagram I got here, many of you will recognize it if you've seen some of the RFPs that have been on the street recent years with some of the states that I've been working with. This is a summary view of all the detail we just went through. I think the only thing I'll point out is the stuff in black across the top is the front door into the parts that I talked about, but I didn't show. So there's the supplier access on the left, and then there's the government access on the top in the center, and you can see that the state is in the middle. We've got local government political subdivision on the right, and then higher ed called out. The story, the concept here is just reinforcing who you share this with is up to you. It's as broad as you want to go, but the rest of it is, we've already covered the details, but this is just a summary. And then just acknowledge those of you who made the choice to be on this call and have suffered through this with me in person. I want everybody else to understand what you had to go through. So I have a picture of what this slide looks like, or what I just went through looks like when I'm doing it in person. So you all can understand what the poor souls have had to suffer with when I do it on a whiteboard. And I've often said that if you weren't in the room, you'll never know what this says. So I wanted to make sure I didn't do a whiteboard exercise with you all in this session. We got something in a PowerPoint that at least has a construct that you can read. Because you can tell my handwriting is some kind of bad there. All right, let's wrap up. Pardon?
I've seen.
All right. So let me go through, I'm just going to hit these slides real fast. You know, I talked about the goals, but I want to give you some takeaways that are specifics about, I talk about some of the benefits as I went through the slides. I want to give you just some specific snapshots of the takeaway slides to go with that. So what are the potential benefits? But let me give it a caveat. You don't get anything from those benefits, or you don't achieve any of those goals if they don't use the system. If this doesn't become the way you do business, you will not achieve the broad benefits of it. It will just be a token effort, and you'll be just a different flavor of what you're suffering from, whatever tools you're doing today. So it's a challenge to get everybody to use it, especially when I'm talking about down to a lot of state employee levels that are outside of the procurement offices and a lot of suppliers. So a lot of vision around that and planning around it. But the world of e-procurement has matured substantially since I started. It has got a lot of support, a lot of expertise. NASPO has got a tremendous bench shelf to try to help you with this. So it doesn't have to be the struggle that many of us have had to do many years ago. So let me just hit this. I'm just going to show you the bullets. We talked about getting after efficiency. What are the examples of the specific efficiencies you can get? You know, getting those standards, getting it self-serve instead of somebody doing it for you, automating those manual processes, getting all that workflow and approvals out of email, out of a variety of systems, get it in one place so you can get that faster cycle time. And I will tell you, in an e-procurement world, majority of your purchase orders from the time a requisition is submitted to when a PO goes out is almost always same day or next day turnaround until it gets to the vendor. Imagine that difference. One place for the suppliers to do everything. We talked about all those supplier opportunities and benefits from that, the electronic transactions. If I can send it electronically and get it electronically, then I get paid out of the paper and I get out of the data entry, right? And I didn't mention this earlier, but mobile is here in all of e-procurement, either because there's apps available or because it's mobile ready and it can adjust itself for the mobile environment. You can expect that you're going to benefit from that. Key places that happens to be benefit efficiency. Imagine approving things like requisitions or any of those other approval things as a state approver. If I can do it on my mobile, I'm running between meetings and I can see what I need to see to approve it. I don't have to wait to get back to my desk to approve. If I'm a supplier looking for business opportunities and I'm out driving my vehicle from one sales call to another and I can see on my mobile device that opportunity, I can act on it quick and maybe not miss it, right? So that's what the mobile kind of values are. Other things besides that, but those are core ones that I call out always. And then integration. One of the things that is terrible from an e-procurement implementation reputation is if I have to say, use e-procurement to produce a purchase order and then trot over to your other keyboard and key in that PO to the finance system so they can pay the vendor. That double entry is a really tough sell. The integration capabilities between systems, that's not out of reach expectations for you today. Then competition. I talked a few examples of these already, but if I'm a supplier, I got one place to look for bids. You know, in most of our states that don't have a centralized system, you got state agencies with their bids posted on one site. You got central procurement with theirs over here, maybe some repetition. Local governments have theirs. You bring it all to one place. You just made the supplier's world simpler and you made it create more opportunities for those that are trying to get bids. The more suppliers have one place to look, the more suppliers will find it, the more competition you'll get. So then the supplier base, you get more in the system, you get more competition. And we talk about leveling the playing field. I didn't talk about this earlier, but small businesses do not have the money to invest in these technologies. You do an e-procurement system with the vision we've talked about here, you just level the playing field where they get access to technologies without having to invest in them. You give them, think of the invoicing thing. I just gave them a way to do an electronic invoice with something called PO Flip. That other guys who have got big shops, big organizations, they got electronic invoicing because they built a system to do it. Big differences there. So it opens that, levels the field. It gets everybody access to all the solicitations from that first bullet. So you get more competition for the small guys. And so that's a big chance, big opportunity there. And then the whole idea of automation, it simply empowers the suppliers. It gives them all this stuff in notifications. It gives them a way to deal with you electronically and the bidding. So it just lowers their cost and it gives them a chance to compete better. And then think about it, the electronic procurement file I said before. If all of this is in that electronic procurement record, then you've got it all captured in one place. Cost reduction savings. So there's some specific things I always call out that where you can say, and you can tell I'm giving you information here about for building a business case, which is one of my coming webinars, but here's some specific things. Hey, if I'm doing something without a centralized e-procurement concept of a system today, then I've got a bunch of systems out there. I got a finance system, I've got Access database, Excel stuff. I may have one agency, I may have bought a piece of a system. Who knows what's out there. If I go to one, I cut all those costs out or reduce them at least. So I can get licensing down, I get all the maintenance support. I can bring those IT costs down. that's another benefit here. And then storage. If I go to the electronic procurement file, imagine all the files I'm not saving off on my network drive somewhere or on a paper file. And then centralized support. Today, if you got a whole bunch of different variety of ways people are doing business, you got all kinds of different places they got to call for help. You can centralize that and get efficiencies from that. And if you've got a finance system, like a very high-end finance system, you probably already have a help desk around supporting that system. A lot of the states are building out that same group to pick up the role here. So now you're leveraging those resources even more broadly than what they were already. And the collaboration thing here, we used to do this through email more than anything else, and saying, hey, I'm looking to put a solicitation on the street. Anybody else need some of this stuff too? And they would send out to who they happen to know. You bring that stuff internal to the system. The system already knows people in the system. You already have ways to do the communication and consolidate the answer you get back into the bid without keying it in again. That's the kind of stuff that collaboration lets you do, this consolidation. And I already talked about the local governments, but here's kind of written down here for you about saving them money and getting your contracts more effectively used. And then managing all the spend. We already talked about bringing spend under management, but this is the specifics around that objective. I talked about getting all that data and seeing what's going on. And then that lets me do the things that we've said all along strategically we want to do in procurement. I can consolidate that demand and drive for better prices, do more and better contracts. And I can get rid of some contracts that aren't necessary. Imagine that marketplace getting catalogs in there from people who are not on contract, get some competition going like some of the internet marketplaces are doing already. Then maybe what I can do is get the quoting happening there. And one of the contracts I've got may get enough competition live that I don't need to have a contract anymore. Analytics will let me see that, if that's a possibility. And then compliance. It's all about, we have lots of rules. We're government. We have lots and lots of rules. It's the idea of baking those rules into the tool in a way that doesn't give up the efficiency, but it gives you the insight to monitor and see what's going on, and only see it when you need to see it. So many examples of what I got to retire in Virginia when we got rid of paper requisitions. We got rid of a bunch of approvers who were only approving it because they wanted to see what was going on. We gave them a way to monitor, and the procurement system doesn't make them have to approve anything. Now I just streamlined the approval process of requisition tremendously by taking them out of being an approver, but giving them still monitoring that they wanted for compliance and for whatever role they wanted. And then the last bullet, I can't emphasize this enough. I kind of used it with the P-card example. With P-card purchases today, I got to look at the bank file as after the fact. This is about monitoring and being able to see what's going on right now while it's happening, so I can intervene when I need to intervene. And I only have to look at it if the rules tell me I need to look at it. So it can be smarter and guide me to look at the stuff where it's more meaningful, but I can get to it before it gets too far downstream is the opportunity with this oversight. So, and I say my thing in blue, it's a byproduct. If you use the system every way we just talked about, these things I'm talking about here, they just come with it. It's a natural byproduct of doing the business of the state or your government entity in the tools, following this methodology. Then you can get these things just as a natural byproduct of using the system. And I think this is one of my last slides. I have to check ahead here. So initiatives. One thing that's so true about our life is that political nature of the world doesn't mean we always get go for the low price or do what the private sector does for efficiency. They do partnering with suppliers, long-term commitments, and they don't worry about who's left out. We have a responsibility as public servants to think about our taxpayers. Guess what? Our suppliers are taxpayers too. And so it's about thinking about that. And we have political programs that say we need to build up our small businesses and our socioeconomic disadvantaged vendors as well, especially in-state suppliers. So having these tools lets you weave and bake in those capabilities. So some things that let you do that. When you're looking at bids and seeing who's responded, this tool will show you, if you want it to, whether they're a certified small business. So if you've got a set aside practice in your state that says, I want to give a little benefit to small business over big business, I can see it as part of evaluating, and it's already in the system. It's already there. It elevates that. I can build in new rules that say, hey, I'm going to do this as a small business set aside, and I'm only going to let certified small businesses respond. So I can build that rule in if that's what you need to do. So that all is elevating these programs, that kind of thing. And then monitoring, tracking we talked about. If you want to focus in these areas, you can also let the tool tell you how you're doing as you're going along. And it's in real time. It's not what you did last quarter, it's what you did yesterday. Imagine that time difference. If you can see that timeliness, how much more effective you can be at directing what your organization's doing. And then building in the rules, the thing I think is interesting here to me is that, remember, the configurability and the flexibility I talked about that you can expect from this model of e-procurement. It doesn't mean that you have to have rules that fit the same persons, same organization, same participants the same way. You could have local government rules, for example, that focus on things. You can have rules that target local businesses, not just small businesses. You can drive people to specific contracts. All of those things can be built in to enhance the policies you said that are part of the associated program. And then one of my favorite ones, we all live under the fact that legislatures pass rules and they didn't ask us if it was a good idea, but they pass them and then we have to implement them. That flexibility and configurability that you can expect in e-procurement today allows you to be adapt that way. And in many of the solutions, you can bring that changing capability to change the setup in-house if that's what you choose to do. So that's a great, powerful thing. So you can consider that. But again, somebody asked a question about staffing and the kind of IT people you got to have. The smarter your staff has to be to do this work, the more you have to have talent in-house to do it. And that means sometimes you have to hire those people. So that's the policy stuff that I wanted to hit. And then this is the last slide for content. We already talked about transparency. Oh, I take it back to one more after this. Transparency, we already talked about this one. I think the only thing I would call out here, we have seen a lot of states go to something they call open checkbook concept, where we try to take the finance data and tell stories with it, provide not stories, but provide information, tell what's going on. This gives you a whole different way to tell that story and perspective from a way that people buy things, not the way we pay for things. So that's a difference, a substantial difference. And this whole open access thing is perpetuating our ongoing continuous responsibility to serve the public. We are transparent, we are fair, we are open to everybody. We're not favoritism, it's not the good old boy network. It's all about open. That's what this slide tries to speak to. And let's get all these bullets on the slide here. And this is the last content slide about innovative technologies, and this is what I've already made a lot of reference to. The tools, the industry has moved to cloud-based. We used to always have, and most of our finance systems today are still housed on our own servers in state government or local government. It's the idea of going to cloud-based and having it where it can stay current easier. Think of all the issues we've had with upgrades and that kind of thing, the level of whatever it takes to plan that in. Part of this industry is that we can see that that has moved off to the cloud so we can have a much more effective scenario to support us. And then, and the hardware around that too. You can imagine we're using state systems and it gets slower and slower and slower. Well, these in the cloud environment, they're keeping up with that hardware environment so that they adjust as it goes on the fly. And then secure. These things have evolved so much. The security compliance is tremendous of what you can expect in e-procurement now. So there was for the longest time, I remember when we were going to the internet for the first time and it was referred to as the Wild Wild West, as people were going out on the Wild Wild West for www to buy stuff, and they're out of control and we had to stop it. We couldn't let it happen anymore. That's gone. The security and the controls and all that are inherent here now, and you can expect that. I've already talked about the configurable part. The last thing I'll leave you with is the thing that is really cool about where the e-procurement industry has gone is that it's continuously evolving. What that means is you don't have to go out and tell them, I need this, I need that. The industry is driving because it's chasing a lot of you at one time. So it's not just about the contract they got with one state. They're out working with others because it's cloud-based. They're evolving, trying to build out the tool to make it more effective for everybody. But that next opportunity also drives back evolution and opportunity to you with the tools. That's one of the great exciting things about the cloud-based scenarios. Now, it's not to say if somebody has a tool set that's what we call on-premise, got to be loaded on your servers, that you should ignore that. There's some great technologies there too. It's a balance, what fits you best. So I think the innovation here is about the cloud, but that doesn't mean that cloud is the only opportunity here. So I want to be fair to the industry on that. And then I think the other thing about evolving, I would say here is, it doesn't say it in the bullets, is when you do an e-procurement program, you as an organization have to think of, I am never done with this system. I'm always got to make it better. When my people learn how to use what's already there, what happens is, and this is kind of a change management thing, I always teased about this with my team in Virginia. When they quit complaining about making them use the system and start complaining about needing other things in the system, you've succeeded, because now they are doing business with the tool and they want more, and they've outgrown what you've already given them. So you've got to be looking to stay ahead of that, and you need, the industry is already mindseted that way, which is exciting, so it's an opportunity. But you should envision this e-procurement about being a journey that in some respects never ends. So that's the exciting thing. All right, so I ran over 46 minutes. Wow, who would have thought? Now, the people who have done this with me in person will tell you that's about a third of the time I normally take. So take it for what it's worth. So here's our chance for some questions and some anything anybody wants to post. And it won't be your only chance, because we're going to give you a contact slide here in a minute. Becca, do we have anything?
Not at the moment. So I did want to plug for those folks who stuck with us, and we still have over half of the crowd. We still have over 100 people who stuck with us. Is that Bob is going to be doing a session at Reach, and so that's going to be building the business case. So for those of you who are thinking about registering, go ahead and talk to your managers about doing that, because we're going to continue this conversation, and we are probably going to continue this series in some form or fashion. So if there's something in particular y'all are wondering about for your state or just in general, let us know in the survey. Bob, did you have anything else? There was a couple of things that I'm going to drop to you in email that were specific to the person themselves, not a general question.
I think the only thing I would put out there is that not everybody's in the same place on any procurement journey. Some are already done, some are just starting, some are wanting to start, some have done partial. So if you want to dialogue, ask question, whatever, it's about wherever you're at and whatever you need. We can have this and help in any aspect of what you're doing or thinking about doing. And if you already got solutions in place and you want to brainstorm on ideas of how to get more out of it or go further with it, those are other opportunities as well. And for those of you who are in the e-procurement industry in one fashion or another that are on this call, I would just share with you that the things I've put out here today, while they are really Bob talk, as I said, they're Bob's experience and opinion and concepts, I would just share with you that please take away as much as you can as opportunity to think about what you provide in your service in your system, and think of new ideas. Let this create some innovation for you that'll carry down to our members, our customers, our public sector people here.
Bob, we do have one question from Susan. She said, can you touch just briefly on the typical timeline for an e-procurement project?
Yeah, so if you're doing an RFP straight out from scratch, because what you know, there's a couple of variations to this. If you already know what you need to go do and want to do, then you're going to have to build a business case, and you're going to have to put your requirements together, get your RFP together and all that. So depending on your state situation, that could take 9 months to, I've seen it go as much as 24 months. The politics of your situation come into play. Do you have to go get budget before you can even take act? You got to build a business case for it. The business case can, come together in a few months, and then you got to go through the time cycle of getting budget approved and money approved. So there's a lot of variable into that timeline. But once you get past that, you say, okay, I'm ready to pull my requirements together, write my RFP, get on the street, and get to an award. That can be within a 12-month window. I've seen it go as fast as 6 or 9 months. 6 months is really, please don't do that to yourself. That's what I would say on that one. Implementation, it's in a typical state environment, I would say that you're talking a good 18 months. People in the industry may have different answers, but that's from my experience. 24 months tends to be kind of a sweet spot that lets you get it further rolled out and addressed in terms of broader success early before you have to take it on. But 18-month is a appropriately aggressive kind of target. Can take longer depending on your situation too. So I hopefully that got to Susan's question.
Okay, well, that sounds good. Yeah. All right, well, let's go ahead and wrap up. And Bob, thanks so much. Like I said, we had a great turnout for this, and we've got lots of people saying thanks. It's clear that they want more, so we'll work on that. But we really appreciate your time. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. Just as a reminder, when the webinar closes, you will be directed to a short survey. Please just take a few moments to complete that. It really helps us with feedback. And if you do want credit for UPPCC, probably we're gonna do a 2-hour credit because we've got so much information. But email NASPO@naspo.org. That link is in the chat. And don't forget to look at the website, naspo.org, for information on conferences and upcoming webinars. And thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you for your patience. I know I ran quite a bit over. Thank you.